The biggest reason among various reasons was that no matter how much oil Venezuela has mined, the US has prevented Venezuela from selling oil. All Venezuela did was challenge US-led globalization and face retaliation. US and European capital entered Venezuela and worked hard to develop oil production, but when the government suddenly changed it, the new government of Hugo Chavez confiscated all the developed facilities and nationalized them. They acted against globalization. With almost all countries following globalization, one or two countries revolted, and the United States imposed economic sanctions on these countries. As a result, the economies of countries subject to sanctions and collapsed to the point of disaster. So, over the last 30 years, we have been able to produce most efficiently with the cheapest elements of all economic factors. Another important thing is that no matter how dramatically the output increased, the price of the factor of production did not rise easily. There was an almost unlimited labor force that was supplied at any time, even when production increased. The labor force was newly supplied from China or similar Southeast Asian countries. Raw materials and crude oil were also newly explored in countries that were previously hostile, and production increased. With the supply of cheap raw materials and labor during globalization, it was a special 30 years in which the world could enjoy abundance through efficiency. However, the situation has been changing rapidly now. The biggest problem right now is that China is the reason that globalization has taken a step backwards. The pace of economic growth in the United States was much faster than in the pre-globalization era, and it has reaped many benefits from globalization. However, in this logic of globalization, the country that benefited the most was China. In fact, if the US had been wary of China from the beginning, China would not have grown so quickly. However, the United States made a slight misjudgment about China. The US had the thought that if China continued to incorporate the US as an ally and exchange economically, China would be on the US's side and help the world order. China has benefited most from globalization, rapidly accumulated experience in production, and absorbed technology from the United States and the West very quickly, and made it into its own, even by copying or stealing technology. In this way, China has acquired more advanced technologies than any other country by any means and methods. The semiconductor field has almost reached Korea as well, and many technologies have almost reached the United States and the West. The US became wary of China too late. If China had been hiding its power and ambitions, the United States might have continued to be ignorant. China was starting to reveal its power more and more. That was during the 2008 global financial crisis. After the global financial crisis, China was fully confident that there would be nothing more difficult. In fact, before that, China had a policy of 도광양회. In other words, hiding one's strengths and ability and cultivating strengths and skill in the shadows. But when China looked at the US during the 2008 financial crisis, the US seemed like nothing else. China was a bit misunderstood. So after the financial crisis, China began to put pressure on the US harshly. American society has come to feel threatened by China, with a sense of crisis that China will overtake the United States and usurp hegemony in 20 or 30 years. The United States is trying to bring China down as soon as possible. Among all the mainstream and leading powers in the United States, Democrats and Republican supporters alike came together to create a strong awareness that China must be eliminated by applying strong economic pressure to it. As the war of hegemony begins in this way, the trend of globalization gradually recedes. Now the nationality of the capital begins to emerge. Previously, only efficiency was considered unconditionally. But this time, the question was whether the capital was American or Chinese. In the past, factories were established and operated in countries with low labor cost and high efficiency. But now neither the government nor the people of any country want their own companies to set up factories in authoritarian countries. The US government is telling foreign companies that if they want to do business in the US, they should set up factories in the US to produce and do business. Raw materials and crude oil are also heading towards anti-globalization. Now that a war is going on in Ukraine, Russia is weaponizing important resources and prohibiting exports. We are now turning back to a world where raw materials and crude oil are weapons. Agricultural products as well as raw materials are being weaponized. This will continue with the recent ban on wheat exports from India and palm oil exports from Indonesia. So we have to wake up from the globalization of the last 30 years. Therefore, the possibility of returning to the original world before globalization is very high. For the past 30 years, globalization has led to an active supply of all products, so there is low inflation because the price of goods is cheap. But now the supply of goods is not active, so prices will rise and so will inflation. As globalization and anti-globalization approaches, the price of goods is becoming increasingly unstable. At the moment of transition from globalization to anti-globalization, whether countries or companies adapt well or not is very important. Globalization has only occurred in the past 30 years in human history. This was possible because the United States was the only superpower and few countries opposed the US-led globalization. Globalization is possible only if there are no adversaries. For the past 30 years, China has been able to achieve globalization by adapting to the international order led by the United States. But now China is challenging the hegemony of the United States. Also, if a powerful country invades a weak country for its own benefit and infringes on the interests of other powerful countries, globalization cannot be achieved. However, when Russia invaded Ukraine, it infringed on the interests of the West and globalization was threatened. Therefore, globalization, the international order up to now, has been disrupted and the world is gradually moving toward anti-globalization. Blocks of authoritarian countries such as China, Russia, and North Korea have formed, and other countries are divided into blocks of the United States, Europe, and liberal democracies in Asia. If we do not adapt properly to this current of anti-globalization, any country could go down the wrong road. Therefore, every country should establish an elaborate national strategy to respond well to the current of anti-globalization and become a victorious country.